Good morning, everyone. This is Gary Ditterline. I am the guest host today for Hanging Out on Air, and we're going to talk about being grateful. And I want to welcome my two beautiful ladies, one that I'm married to, and one that is a brand new friend of mine. And ladies, if you will.
Well, I'm Arizona Lowe, so welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm so glad you could be here.
Yes, and I am her fun co-host because I have so much fun when I'm with her. Katrina Pfannkuch. You probably know me better as Creative Katrina, and part of the fun that we get to have on the show is really just getting to talk about passionate topics that come to mind and expressing that stuff. So the fun part is today we actually get to engage and talk with each other about something that we're actually really passionate about, and that's gratitude. It's really important.
Yes, it is. I wanted to let everyone know that I do have the comment tracker open, so if you have your own gratitude practice you would like to share or your own story about gratitude, go ahead and share it with us, and we'll share what you share. Boy, that kind of twisted around, didn't it?
I wanted to also share a little bit about why we decided to do this episode too, because we had been talking about, during our last show about, hey, we really would love to thank our listeners and our readers and all the people that stop by more often and find a name to really be able to do that, that resonates with the audience. Because it's kind of weird to just, we refer to people by name, but it's easier to sort of build that community and having us all join together when we have a common name. And when Arizona and I were talking about it, we're like, we really appreciate our listeners and we want to create a name for them. So why not kind of go that a little further than that and talk about gratitude? Because we really appreciate the fact that you guys show up every Friday. Without you, we wouldn't really have anything to talk about. We'd be doing private hangouts and talking to each other.
Which wouldn't be half as fun.
Right, exactly. So, Arizona, tell them a little bit more about the name again, because I know that you had put a post out there, but I'm not sure how many folks saw that.
Well, I'm going to find the post again to discuss we got 4 possible names at this point. So give me just 1 second, I'm looking.
I know that Jeremy had given us a really good one, and I think his was Deep Thinkers, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and then Ron Snaberger, who is in the audience from Jupiter, Florida, came up, I think it was Incredible Thinkers, or something like that. We had a few more. You came up with one, too. Yeah, the Thinkables. That was what Ron came up with, the Thinkables. I love that. Toby Fusco came up with Heart Thinkers. And you came up with Deep Thinkers with Heart.
It may be a little wordy for folks, but sorry, guys, I'm a writer. That's just what happens.
So,
well, if you would like one more, if you go along Descartes' philosophy, I think, therefore I am, then that may be something to, and to put a little spin on it, I think, therefore we are.
That's a good one, too. I like having lots of suggestions because it just gives people more of a chance to comment and share, too. Because that's what we really want. We want something that resonates with all of you. So we'll talk a little bit more about the contest part of it at the end, but I just kind of wanted to remind everybody that we'd be doing that as part of the show today.
Yeah, and we're actually, the nominations for the name are going to end at the end of the show. And we're going to run a poll through next week and announce the winning name next week.
Woohoo! So I'm going to ask you a question, Arizona.
Okay, I'll give you an answer if I can.
Yes. Well, in terms of the topic of gratitude, you can be a grateful person and resonate with that as an identity. Or you can sort of say, hey, I'm grateful for this in this moment. A lot of people don't necessarily have a gratitude practice, but they live in the flow of gratitude. So I'd like to hear your opinion on, how you feel that gratitude best fits into not only just daily life, but in your daily practice. I don't know if you have something that you use or that you do.
Well, I do have a daily practice of gratitude. Like, I won't even get out of bed until I have, at least given one grateful I'm grateful for
Mhm.
waking up, and 9 times out of 10, I look over at my sugar, and I'm grateful for seeing his smile. Um, but my gratitude practice is all day long.
Mhm.
Everything I do, there's a reason to be grateful for it, even for the icky stuff like housework.
Mhm. Yeah, which is
Because
why we named the show that.
exactly. And I realized it was one of those. Housework actually gave me my heart mind, what I call my heart mind aha moment.
Mhm.
As I was cleaning the housework one day, and I'm thinking about all the things that, all the inner stuff that I'm trying to work on, and it went, wow, I'm really grateful for housework because I can sit and think about, be mindful about the things I need to work on myself while I'm doing it.
Mhm. Well,
And
and it
so,
gives you that pause too, because we're so integrated in action where we're constantly thinking while we're doing things, and although housework is still doing, you're able to sort of separate out of your mind and just sort of focus on the task, and you can do that in a way where you're present because you have to pay attention. You don't want to drop the dish on the floor, but you're not necessarily using the same sort of mental skills that you would use when you're doing actual work, or when you're stuck in your mind trying to think out a problem. It's I think that's the gratitude part of it too. You kind of show up and you do what you need to do, but you also get to focus on, hey, I'm helping myself grow and clean my house, and your focus is just elsewhere, so it allows other things to sort of come to the surface that need to.
right. How about you? How do you practice gratitude?
It's funny. I would say that my practice is sort of all over the place, but I do have a gratitude practice every day. Sometimes it ends up in the morning when I get out of bed. Other times it is more so in the evening when I'm going to sleep. But I would say that most of the time it's in nature. Like sometimes, I mean, Colorado, you live in Colorado too. It's such a beautiful place.
Oh, it
And
is.
for me, getting outside, just being able to be in this beautiful space brings me right into a gratitude space pretty quickly. And then I see my crow. Like I went for a walk very shortly before our call today, and the first bird I saw was a crow. So it's when I'm acknowledging these little messages that I get that I can be in gratitude and present in that moment. And just the way you are as well. Like I try to, it's a little part of my day, but not necessarily at a consistent time or place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
now, how about, have you worked out yet a manner to handle negative situations and still be grateful for them?
That's a great question because I think when for me, it shows up as irritation first. Because as an empath, I do have to sort out some of my feelings a little bit more. So it's like, hey, is this something that I'm dealing with? Is this something I'm picking up from someone else? So once I can get that sorted out and realize, like, hey, I'm having a bad day, but maybe it's not about me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm able to let that go. But I have to be mindful of it first. If it is an emotional thing that I'm working through, I will feel that irritation and friction, and then I try to ask the question, why am I seeing this? Or why am I feeling it? Because that's, to me, where the gratitude piece comes in. And it allows me to look at it objectively and then turn it around and say, okay, well, I'm clearly seeing this for a reason. Maybe it's the 100th time I've seen it today. But it's really important for me to see this, and until I actually can ask why am I seeing it or why is it irritating me, I can't actually be grateful for it because I'm resentful of it and I'm
Mm-hmm.
judging it. So I try to turn it around a little bit that way. And, at the same time, it's always about learning for me. I try to turn it around in that sense too. When I find that something's really irritating or maybe not going my way, I realize, like, hey, it may not be what I want, but clearly I'm supposed to be learning from it somehow. So how can I do that? Yeah. How
Yeah.
about you?
Um, I think it's very similar to you in the fact that I look at the negative situation and I actually will nitpick it apart trying to find the lesson because I figure every negative situation has something I can learn from. And once I can find the lesson that I'm supposed to learn, then I can be grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's funny too when you can see other people around you being grateful and sort of going with the flow. It makes a big difference because it sort of just brings that same experience back to you. You know, I told you guys a really quick story before I jumped on the call today. During my walk, I saw these two little kids, right? One of them had just jumped out of his parents' car. It was just starting to rain, and he kind of ran down into the soccer field. This was a handful of kids, like 6 or 7 years old, all playing soccer. And it wasn't downpouring rain, but it was raining a little bit. And the kid that had just jumped out of the car runs over and he talks to the goalie. He's like, you guys are playing in the rain? And the little kid that was goalie turned on. He's like, we just love playing soccer. We don't care about playing in the rain. And it's those little moments where you realize, like, wow, it's the gratitude expressions all around you bring you back to the fact that you can be grateful for even more things in your own life because you're seeing it in action. And what a great thing to see, but also a great thing to feel.
Oh,
right?
it is. Definitely. Yeah. Ron Snaberger says, lots of times I think of my mother-in-law who passed, and I'm grateful for her guidance and how she was grateful and what she taught me. Joyful. Mm-hmm. Oh, her line was, oh, be joyful. Sorry. My comment kind of messed up there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it is a learned behavior. I mean, I come from a family of worriers. They like to worry a lot. And it's almost like, hey, when something actually goes well, it's like, well, that's just because that happens sometimes, rather than sort of flipping that around and saying, wow, things are flowing. There's always something to be grateful for. And so I think that when you have that worry part of you come in, it can steal that sense of gratitude that you can have. But, I mean, you know, it's important to learn how to work with that emotion. And you don't get angry about it. Just notice when it's kind of popping up a little bit.
Yeah, well, you know, I was raised in an angry household.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of arguing. I mean, my mother even would say, well, arguing is how we prove that we love each other. I'm serious. So, you know, the whole concept of, sometimes I feel like I'm a dunce and I'm learning this stuff late. But the whole concept of being grateful was foreign, you know, in the way I was raised, and it was foreign, you know, for me in my 20s and into my 30s.
Yep.
So how about you? How did you even begin to learn, you know, to be grateful?
I love that question because I'm trying to phrase this in a way that would make sense in terms of the context, because I've already told you that, you know, I come from a family of warriors. They also tried to express themselves through a lot of yelling. It was a lot of talking, a lot of shouting. Yeah. It's like, hey, I have something to say. I should be really loud and say it in your face. But I remember at some point I would just kind of go about and be myself, do my thing. And I was asking my mom a question because I was struggling with something. I was having a hard time making up a decision. And she said, well, don't worry about it. It always just works out for you. So I think in some ways I was showing up, going with that flow because I was trusting my intuition and my gut. But it wasn't until, again, that I was in my 30s as well that I realized, like, wow, this if I actually made it into a practice, if I could take all of these challenges that I've had along the way and really harness the energy that I have to be more mindful and be in a gratitude space, a lot of other things started to turn around instead of just kind of like bopping here and there, saying, oh, well, today was a good day, I guess. Right?
Oh, I remember those days.
You know, that's not the same thing as having an active gratitude progress or process. But I do think it's important to go through those stages to realize, like, hey, this is how it feels when a day goes well, and I didn't have to actually think about it. It just showed up, and it happened. You know, how did I feel? How do I want more of that in my life? And I think, it wasn't until I was in my 30s as well that I realized that I could turn it into a practice. So, yeah.
And I don't even think of it anymore as a practice. I mean, it's just the way I live now.
It's like flip-flopped, right?
Yeah, now when I start to feel irritated or start to feel something's wrong, I immediately, my first mind is, am I being grateful? Am I showing gratitude for what I have? And, you know, then, you know, things usually turn around and my irritation kind of calms down. And, I mean, you really have to push me hard to get me angry anymore. Would you agree with that, Gary?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, yeah. But it's cool to be able to see that flip-flop process in yourself, right? Because you get from not noticing to like, wow, I can be mindful of it. to knowing when you're in the flow of gratitude and when you're not. Because when it's a practice, you feel when you're out of that alignment. It just doesn't feel natural anymore.
Right, definitely.
Yeah, and it's a good piece of information to know. You know, I think a lot of times we jump into judgment. It's like, oh, I'm not being a very grateful person today. Well, you know, we all have days where we get frustrated. That happens to everyone. But the important part is that now that you realize how that feels, you can find a way to get back into it that's simple. I don't know if in terms of like an actual simple go-to practice that maybe some folks in the audience have that they use all the time, but you know.
I know some of the ones I have heard about is, you know, starting your morning by writing 3 or 4 things that you're grateful for. And I use that to begin with when I very, very, very first started what I call my grateful practice.
Well,
have you heard of any others?
Yeah, I mean, I think the writing part of it gets you in the tactile part. Because when you're in your mind about it, you're like, hey, I could be grateful of these things, but you're not feeling it as much. Like I feel like you have to go through stages of being aware of it and acknowledging it, then getting used to feeling it. And I really think that the writing part allows you to do that. Helps you go through all those steps, especially for the stuff that you don't want, like the stuff that's really frustrating and maybe you aren't really sure how to be grateful for it.
And I think it all leads up to speaking it.
Yep.
You know, when you can actually take something that you're irritated at and speak your gratitude about it, or even just a daily, hey, I appreciate you. You know, being able to very freely tell people. I mean, when I write it here on Google Plus or on Twitter, or when I run into someone, I'm really bad at telling, you know, waitresses or servers in a restaurant, hey, I really appreciate what you do. I get some really weird looks.
Really?
I do sometimes. Someone's busting a table, and this little old lady comes over and says, hey, I appreciate that. I mean, you know, I get some weird looks.
But I find that goes such a long way, you know, especially any customer service-based business on the phone. I mean, for me, I would like someone to thank me for the time and the energy and the work that I'm putting into showing up. So why wouldn't I want to do that for someone else? It's just sort of putting out into the world what you would want to receive and sort of looking at it from that perspective for me too.
Exactly.
Not necessarily a selfish perspective, but just that feeling of like, hey, I feel really good when I feel appreciated and people are grateful for what I do, so why would I not want to share that with someone else?
Well, I think it's, I'm laughing at Ron's message. Ron says, and then Arizona gets a message from me, and I crank her up again, and she forgets about being grateful. LOL. Oh, Ron, you're one of the big ones I am the most grateful for out there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's one of the great things about social media is that it's actually completely changed how we can share gratitude, really. There may be a lot of folks before that it was just your small circle of people that you knew in person. And you really could only share gratitude with them in that way. But, you know, when you have the whole internet, you have video, you have text messaging, you have online e-cards, you have so many more ways to actually be grateful and express that with people, that's actually a gift in and of itself. You just have more options.
Oh, it definitely is. No doubt.
Do you have a favorite way that you like to do that? Like if you're going to do it, I know that you like to share your photos, which is awesome because I love seeing your photos on Google Plus. But
yeah, I love picking out, like when I share a photo, I'll think of, and these are when I list these 12 people, they are the first 12 people that come to my mind. And you know, they're people who've made a difference during that day for me because I usually do my photos pretty late. And with my thanks, I call it my special thanks or whatever, you know, or special shout outs. And there are people I'm just trying to tell thank you to. Yeah,
I mean, and how awesome does it feel when you were mentioned out of the blue, right? It's just so nice. It feels good. It makes you want to share and do the same thing for someone else. And now on Google Plus, you could do something with some really pretty pictures. You could do that on Instagram and Pinterest and all the other platforms as well. But I think especially on Google Plus, a lot of people are very good about sharing that kind of thing and spreading the love on Friday. I like that.
Yeah, I think so. So I was going to ask you, I mean, we're talking about being grateful and gratitude. How do you define gratitude?
That's a good question. For me, it's more along the lines of how something makes me feel. And so in terms of expressing or defining that part of it, it's what can I do that not only fills my heart, but really expresses how I truly feel to be thankful for what I'm feeling. Because to me, it is about that emotional piece. I can be thankful in my mind and say, oh yeah, thanks for, like you said, thank you to my waitress, thank you. But if I can actually be present and feel what that gratitude feels like in my heart, that to me is truly what the definition of gratitude is. It's that energy field that I'm not only tuning into in myself, but I'm actually putting out there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is my definition would be is the positive energy that comes from showing the appreciation.
Yeah, I know it's not something tangible, and it isn't necessarily something that people can put a handle on, but you feel it when someone's with you and fully present with you, looking in your eyes, really deeply listening to what you have to say. That in and of itself is an expression of gratitude, because they're there actually really truly appreciating who you are and the essence of who you are. And you can feel that, absolutely. So don't ever deny or don't ever forget the fact that just because it's not something that's tangible, that it's not being felt or it's not being seen, because that's, I think, a large part of why these things work so well for folks. We can't all physically be in the same place at the same time, but it doesn't mean we can't see each other and appreciate each other.
And you started a comment, you said, if so, don't ever deny, and then you went off on a different tangent. But it made me think, when you said that, it made me think about how many times has someone said thank you and you poo-pawed it away.
Yeah.
And, I'm guilty of it. I am probably the world's worst at being guilty of this one. But in truth, you may be stealing their joy away from them. The joy that they get from expressing the gratitude.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, it's an exchange. And just because that exchange isn't always equal doesn't necessarily mean that down the line they might not realize 2 days later, like, wow, someone was really trying to express gratitude and I missed that opportunity. But you have to be tuned into the present moment to really appreciate and accept that. And I do know with folks, women do this a lot. It's like, hey, that dress is beautiful. Oh, I've had it for like 5 years. I mean, we've heard that expression tons and tons of times, especially with creatives a lot too, because it's something that comes so natural to them. They can't actually express or take in the gratitude that people have for the art that they're sharing. But you're right, it's a practice that we have to be good at accepting the feedback and really being appreciative of what people are sharing with us too. It definitely can be a two-way street in that sense, and it doesn't feel good when people poo-poo that.
No, it doesn't. As Gary well knows, because I'll tell Gary, hey, you're the bestest, and he'll, oh no, you're the bestest, and we'll go back and forth. I think that's the only thing we've ever fussed about.
Right. But I think at the end of the day, I always look at people as people, right? But they're also mirrors for each other. So when you're interacting with a person that maybe can't take in that gratitude that you're expressing with them, it's also a really interesting mirror back into yourself about where maybe you're not able to express gratitude for your own abilities and your own awesomeness, right? It's always that mirror kind of going back and forth that I think people forget about sometimes.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. I got to think about that one.
Yeah, well, we're all here to teach each other, and we can't learn very much when our ears and heart are closed.
That's true.
Oh, goodness. Exactly. Well, and I think for a lot of people, gratitude is foreign, right? Because, we were just talking about it earlier. They don't have a model for how to do that. There's no right way to express gratitude. You just have to be willing to do that in the moment and be open to how it feels good for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, I'm hoping that the more I see gratitude, because gratitude is being spoken about a lot now, especially as people are realizing, hey, if I live a lifestyle of gratitude, all of a sudden I feel calmer and happier and more content. It isn't so much that you're getting wealth and you're going to get a whole bunch more material things.
Right.
It's how you feel in your heart once you've, you know, started living the lifestyle.
Well, and what a great way to feel when you wake up every day, right? It's that practice of an alignment. You're building a muscle, just like if you're going to the gym. And the more that you can get in that space with it, it feels so much more natural. And I know that for a lot of people, it's uncomfortable at first. It feels weird.
It does.
I hear a lot of people going, "Oh, thank God," just because something horrible didn't happen. But hey, they're on their way to expressing some form of gratitude. You know, and the more we can all get there, that we're all kind of doing that as a planet. That's the really cool part. It's that we're all sort of awakening up to that practice for ourselves, so that we can be more of a cohesive, collective energy of gratitude as a whole, and that's really powerful. I mean, I haven't particularly joined any of the circles, but sometimes they'll do that. They'll have like, hey, you know, let's get together at this time. You know, sometimes it has to do with some astrological things that are going on, like let's just get together and sit in meditation and be grateful, right? Have that sense of gratefulness, or you focus on an intention of gratefulness, I should say. And those things are happening more too.
And what I like seeing, what thrills me about seeing, you know, the gratitude practice spreading and having circles like that is that children are now being introduced to it. Right from the get-go, from the beginning of their lives, they, you know, are experiencing the practice of gratitude. And I think that is just thrilling.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. I mean, just the bridge that we're building here is from an old way of thinking and getting stuck in the mind to realizing, like, hey, being grateful is good for the heart. It's good for all of what you're doing. It helps open you up to possibility. It just reminds you that there's more to life than what is physically in front of you, right? Yeah, because exactly. Sometimes in those tough times, it's gratitude that actually also builds on faith, right? You're being grateful for what you have in the moment, because, you know, maybe a year ago you didn't have that, and maybe a year ago you didn't express gratitude for whatever you had. So now's the present moment, even if it's a trying moment. Hey, why not take that moment and express gratitude for what you have right now, because you have to have faith in moving forward that something's going to show up, right? It just, to me, it helps build that faith motor, if you will.
Well, and as you practice gratitude more and more, you will notice shifts. Things will start changing. Things will start improving. Opportunities will, all of a sudden, opportunities that may have always been there light up and you can't miss them.
Right. And I think the most interesting part of all of that is that also being accepting for how it shows up, right? Because you can't control that. In your mind, you can be grateful and say, okay, so if I'm in this practice, you know, I'm going to start seeing these things show up, but I want them to show up in this way. And that, I think, is a little bit more the controlling side. So the more you can kind of just be in the flow and be grateful for however it's showing up. You don't know why it's coming up that way. It just is.
Yeah. It is definitely important to remember those things that you can control and those things you can't control.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're an artist. You understand. I mean, when you're hitting those creative blocks, right, you're in a dry spell. You don't feel like anything is resonating with you, and you're not really sure how you're going to move forward past that. It can really be hard to be grateful for what you've already created. Because you don't, yeah, because you can't look at what you've already made and its beauty because you're too focused and frustrated on the fact that you can't create something different and new right now.
Right. I can totally agree with that.
Right.
Been there, done that, and then when you get in that, well, when I get in that mindset personally, it doesn't matter what I create. It doesn't matter how good what I create is.
No.
Garbage in my mind.
Yeah. Right, yeah. We've all been there where, I can go back and edit something a million times and it still just doesn't feel right because whatever I had envisioned in my brain, it's not showing up that way. So a lot of times the gratitude the most grateful thing you can do is to take a break.
Yes, walk away and come back another day.
Yeah, just take a break, let it flow through. And I will say this: we're in a world obviously that's very fast paced. That's not any sort of revelation. So the only way that you can really be grateful in that fast paced environment is to take that time out, because there's always a way to fill it. There's always a way to fill yourself with something else to do, but that also takes away from that 5 seconds that you can be grateful. Right? So just wiggle that in with the rest of your to-do somewhere.
It doesn't take long.
Wedge it in there. Yeah, just find a way to stick it in, and it really does become more natural. But I think for me, the feeling of knowing that I can just be present with how gratefulness feels is really what switches things on for me, and I can be more my passion that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's how my gratefulness practice has evolved.
Yeah, and I have a good question for you. Being grateful through transition, because that's a really challenging thing when you are basically between two worlds, right? You've got foot in one world, foot in the other. You have no idea what's coming. You're totally changing your perspective and everything that you're doing. Like, how do you manage being grateful in that transition space?
Well, yeah, I have been through a couple of those. Several of those, actually. The biggest one I can think of is when I went from normal everyday life to living at Twin Oaks, which is the intentional community I lived at, and there's no contact with the outside world, basically. So I trip once a week into Charlottesville, and you live with these 100 people. That was a really difficult transition for me, and at the same time, that was also when I was building my gratitude practice.
Yeah, and I think more so than anything else, transition times are when you question your ability to be grateful the most. It's like, what can I find here to be grateful? And I think sometimes is trying. It's a little bit of a challenge. And I'm going to let you talk for a second because I'm pretty sure you guys can see that I'm getting really dark.
You are.
I want to turn my light on real quick, so I'm going to pass it over to Arizona for a second.
I think the thing with transitions is not only are you unsure about what you're doing, so you're not in a mindful state to be grateful, is that it just goes so crazy. Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah, I know. I'm not hidden in a dark cave somewhere.
Transitions also are very time consuming.
Yep.
And so if you're not in the space where you can just feel gratitude all the time, then it's really difficult to make that to make the transition with gratitude. I don't know if any of that made any sense. You can be so busy trying to transition and trying to change that you can forget your practice of gratitude. There we go.
Yes, exactly. No, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up, because I think when you're in transition, that's when gratitude is actually one of your most powerful tools, because you don't know what's going to happen. You have to have faith that you're on the right path, and gratitude will help keep you grounded. It'll help you to just sort of have a space to relax a little bit because you're anxious about the future. How's this going to turn out? How am I going to actually move forward in a way that feels good for me? But that's all on your mind.
Did I make the right decision?
Yeah. But if you could be grateful, it sort of brings you back to feeling grounded. And while the transition space can be a little bit out of balance for you, I do think that you find that's when you can dig in the deepest parts of you to find the pieces that maybe you didn't recognize before to be grateful, right? And
yeah, exactly.
And
on the flip, I told you about probably my worst transition, and I was getting a lot of feedback from the outside that I was making wrong decisions too. But my easiest transition was moving here to Colorado Springs and deciding to make a life of Gary. It just flowed. It was just the easiest easiest transition I've ever made. But my practice of gratitude was, pretty set and pretty,
Right.
very comfortable with it. So.
Yeah, well, it's funny because my transition to Colorado was completely different. Because I moved here, and it really was a chaotic transition for me for a variety of reasons. And it was funny because I kept saying, I need to move, I need to leave, it's got to be the place. But it was actually the dynamic and the relationship that I was in. And as soon as we broke up, it's like, wow, I can actually finally appreciate Colorado. I don't feel like I want to run away. I don't feel like it's the place. I can actually start expressing gratitude for all the wonderful gifts that I have in leaving a life on the East Coast, which didn't fit for me anyway. And then I could start appreciating really what I was getting while I was here. It just came about in a way that, I wouldn't have preferred. Right? But, I mean, that's, I think, where the biggest stretches of our own gratitude come into play.
Well, and I think that brings up another point, and I think it's going to have to be probably our last point before we start wrapping.
Yeah.
Negative people to me can suck the gratitude out of me. They can suck everything out of me. Do you find the same thing? As was that kind of maybe where you were at with that relationship that you broke off?
Yeah, I think so. I would say that because I'm a fairly positive person, that sometimes when especially at that age when I was like younger and around a lot of people that couldn't really show up in the same way, they were kind of sucking all the energy out of me.
Yeah.
And I just didn't understand that that's what was happening or the role that I was playing in that. And so I was looking around me going, life really doesn't have to be this hard, so why is it? It was kind of that wake-up call to say, like, okay, I know I moved out here for a reason. I may not understand the reason fully right now, but there's definitely things to be grateful for, even if that means part of that gratitude is letting something go. Because I think sometimes when we're grateful, it's about appreciating what has been and being fully okay with releasing it for good.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, there's definitely parts that I think for me in that transition, that was what I learned the most, is that you don't have to dig in and hold on to something that isn't working anymore. You can be grateful for what it's shared and then finally let it go. Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful thought to end our discussion on.
So let's see. Can we post the I'm assuming we're going to post the link in here so people can vote on the poll, right?
Yeah, as soon as I set up the poll, which will be probably about 7:30 this evening Mountain Time, so 8:30 Central, and I'm saying this for Jim, and Ron Schneeberger is on Eastern Time, so it'll be 7:30, 8:30, 9:30 Eastern Time.
Oh, perfect.
So.
Well, I was excited to get to just chat with you today. I mean, I think it's important that people realize that when they show up here, I am very grateful for that. Like every Friday, I'm grateful I get to spend time with Arizona. I'm really happy that I got to meet Gary too, because he's really fun. I like him. And just the fact that I get to share a little bit of myself with all of you on Friday, and you care enough to show up and add your own 2 cents, like that means a lot to me. So I wanted to just say thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you too. I mean, you're one of the easiest people to talk with. So thank you for sharing this discussion, and thank you for showing up every single Friday and working with me on the show, which is more play than work. Right.
We get to play and have a lot of fun, and that to me, it means that I'm on the right track to expressing more gratitude without trying. Right?
Yeah. Ron says his mind is working again. Look out. If you ever have an after... I guess you're talking about an after green room. I'm having a hard time with this.
Yes.
Yes, an after green room. You can invite people in to the think tank.
Yes.
That's true. So which gets back on our naming thing. We haven't had any more names come across, so I guess I'm going to put those 4 names up for vote.
Yeah.
And let's, I'll let it stretch until I set up the poll. If somebody else throws another name, I'll add it.
Yeah, and you have to come up with a few too. You haven't added any of yours in there.
I really just I thought it was more important that it be a name that the audience could identify with rather than something that I could identify with, you know.
Well, you might inspire someone. You never know. If you toss a couple names out there, it might actually spark something in somebody else.
That's true, and I may do that.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. I'm excited because I do feel like we're close to coming up with a good name. And again, thanks to all of you today.
Yeah, thank you. Gary, you got any last minute words?
The only thing that I have is I have a little quote of the day, and it goes something like this: "Life is not a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving in a well-preserved body, but to skid in broadsides, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, 'Wow, what a ride!'"
I love it.
Me too.
Well, that's what he's thinking when he's playing poker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gary. It's been fun chatting with you today, too, and thank you so much for helping us out.
Thank you, and I really loved your interactions with each other. That was very inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. We'll see y'all.
Happy
Sunday.
Friday.